My wife told me she was pregnant, but I couldn't possibly be the father because I'm infertile. I'm 38, she's 33, we've been married for 2 years and dated for 3 before that. She wanted to get married more than I did, and to make her happy, I agreed. A year ago, we started trying to have a child, at her insistence again. We tried really hard, but we couldn't conceive. The situation affected my mental health so deeply that I decided to get tested. While we were trying to conceive, my wife became quite cruel. I tried to cope with her behavior, but it became unbearable for me. A few days after the examination, the doctors told me I was infertile. Honestly, it broke my heart. Although having a child wasn't originally my idea, I'd already started imagining myself as a father and truly wanted to become one. Learning that I'd never be able to become a dad was, at that moment, the worst news of my life. But even worse was yet to come. I tried to gather the courage to tell my wife that I was the reason we couldn't conceive, but I was terrified of her reaction. She was already treating me quite harshly, and I couldn't imagine how she'd respond upon learning that what she wanted most would very likely never happen with me. So I waited several days after receiving the test results before telling her, but in the end, she surprised me first. 4 days after I found out I was infertile, she sat me down and said she had some really important news. I was extremely frightened, thinking she'd somehow discovered my infertility, but no, she wanted to tell me she was finally pregnant. I was utterly shocked by what she said, but luckily she didn't notice my true feelings and immediately started celebrating. I tried to share her joy to avoid raising any suspicion, but the very next day I went back for another examination to confirm once and for all that I was indeed completely infertile. The results came back the same. I was confused. If I wasn't the father, then my wife was definitely cheating on me. Medical procedures she would have needed for artificial insemination were expensive, and since I was the sole earner in our household, she couldn't have afforded them without asking me for the money. Therefore, she was clearly having an affair. The thought was so strange and horrifying that I did nothing for the next few days while my wife planned a full-blown party to announce her pregnancy. She looked genuinely happy while I was utterly crushed, but I couldn't let her see it because I needed to get to the bottom of what was happening. I didn't even tell my family what was going on and kept everything secret because it was too personal to share with anyone. I also couldn't confront my wife about my suspicions, partly because too much time had already passed, and more importantly because I wanted to find out exactly who the father of her child was. If I had confronted her right away, she might have simply left and I'd never have found out the truth. Fortunately, I discovered everything on the day of the party itself. The celebration was attended by many people, including both our families, our friends, and several of my colleagues. She also invited one of our neighbors who lives directly across the street from us. He's 27 years old, young, and undeniably much better looking than me. In fact, he probably looks better than most people. He's a model. Or rather, he's still trying to make a name for himself in the modeling industry. He moved into his aunt's house to be closer to the city since his own family lives very far away. My wife always had a soft spot for him. I never had anything against the guy because he seemed quite nice, and I trusted my wife. But the moment he walked into the house on the day of the party and my wife's eyes lit up, I sensed something had changed. She went straight to him as soon as he entered, and they hugged longer than she had hugged any of the other guests. It seemed no one else noticed, but I could clearly see there was something between them, and I just needed to find a way to confirm it.
So I pretended I was going to the bathroom, but instead went to the bedroom and opened my wife's laptop. A few days after she told me she was pregnant, I'd already checked her phone while she was asleep, but found nothing suspicious. Accessing her laptop was a bit trickier because whenever I was home, she was constantly watching something or typing on it. When I asked what she was doing, she'd turn the screen away and say she was working on her novel. This had been going on for several months, and I'd respected her privacy because I genuinely believed she was writing a novel. Now the situation had changed, and I was almost certain there was no novel, it was just an excuse to keep the contents of her laptop hidden from me. Fortunately, there was no password, so I easily gained access. After some searching, I found another email address besides her main one. I switched to it and checked both the sent and received messages. Those emails were full of love declarations between my wife and our neighbor. I knew it was him because the guy used his real name. In the more recent emails, she had told him she was pregnant. He took it badly and seemed upset, so the messages stopped for a while, presumably because he wanted to end things, but my wife wasn't about to let him go. Eventually, I found the worst email of all. She wrote to him that she had spoken to a friend who was a lawyer and that this friend would help her file for divorce right after the baby was born. The reason she had pushed so hard to get pregnant with me in the first place was to secure child support and spousal maintenance after the divorce. By holding on to the child, she figured she could run away with our neighbor a few months later and live happily ever after. I was horrified when I read that email, and I still feel sick to my stomach every time I recall its contents. Still, I quickly pulled myself together. I took several photos of those emails on my phone before closing the laptop and putting it back exactly where it had been. I was less shocked by the affair itself and far more disturbed by this calculated, grandiose scheme. Cheating is one thing, but trying to scam me financially on top of everything else was unforgivable. And to top it all off, she'd been such a convincing actress that I hadn't suspected a thing. But I was so furious that I decided to see it through and get my revenge. I resolved to play along and then strike when she least expected it. There was no way I was going to let her walk away without experiencing the same pain of betrayal and disappointment I'd felt upon discovering her deceitful, manipulative nature. Call me crazy, but I did what I had to do. So for the next 9 months, I played the role of the perfect husband and expectant father. It was incredibly difficult, knowing the whole time that she was lying to me outright, but the more she lied and pretended to be happy with me, the more it strengthened my resolve to see this through to the end. I attended every one of her doctor's appointments, made sure she took her vitamins on time, and was the absolute best husband anyone could dream of. Finally, a few days ago, my wife went into labor. I was incredibly nervous about the whole situation, but I pushed those feelings aside and personally drove her to the hospital. I called her parents ahead of time, but not mine, because I didn't want them there if things got too dramatic. Her parents lived about an hour away from the hospital, so we had a little time alone. That's when I decided to drop my bomb. Once she was safely settled in the delivery room, I told her I was going to step out and call our neighbor so he could come be with her. She looked stunned and started mumbling that it wasn't necessary and that she didn't want a stranger in the room while she was giving birth. I just smiled at her and showed her my fertility test results, along with the divorce papers I'd filed just a few days before her due date. I brought them with me on purpose. She looked at everything, still appearing confused. So I explained that even if I'd wanted to, I physically couldn't have impregnated her, so the baby wasn't mine. Then I told her about the emails I'd found in her super secret email account. At that moment, she finally understood what was happening. Her expression was priceless as I walked out of the room while she struggled to find words. I thought I might have to check myself into the hospital too. My heart was pounding like crazy.
I called our neighbor to tell him my wife was in labor. I didn't even wait for his reply and hung up as quickly as possible. Then I got into my car and waited until my wife's family arrived. As soon as I saw her father's car pull up to the hospital, I drove away as fast as I could. I even turned off my phone just to be safe and sped off to a motel outside the city. I'd already packed all my belongings a few weeks earlier and hidden them in the trunk of my car so I'd have everything I needed and wouldn't be caught off guard. I spent the rest of the day watching TV, drinking beer, and doing everything I could to take my mind off what had just happened. That night, I fell asleep quite peacefully, knowing I'd finally put an end to that charade. The next morning, I woke up and turned my phone back on. Naturally, there were hundreds of messages from my wife and our neighbor, none of which I even opened. However, I did notice a few messages from my parents and my brother. I figured my wife had probably contacted them when she couldn't reach me, so I decided to call my parents and talk to them. I told them I'd be coming home soon, and even asked if my brother could be there too, so I could explain the whole situation to them. They deserved to know what had really happened. I arrived at my parents' house. My brother was already there. They all looked a bit confused and slightly annoyed, which was understandable since, in their eyes, I had just missed the birth of my own child and caused them to miss the birth of their grandchild. But I sat them down and told them the whole story, explained everything that had happened and why I'd done what I did. By the time I finished speaking, they were stunned into silence. I'd been bracing myself for a barrage of questions or accusations,
but none came. All my father said was that he hopes nothing worse would happen. If the others had any other comments, they kept them to themselves. So, in that respect, everything remained calm. That was a few days ago. While my family hasn't said much since, my wife has gone out of her way to blame me for ruining her first-time motherhood experience. She's still trying to call and text me constantly ever since I left, but I haven't replied to anything. Even our neighbor messaged me a few hours ago saying my wife was really upset and that we should set aside our differences for her sake and at least try to work things out. I can't believe the audacity of these people, still trying to talk to me as if this were some minor misunderstanding. He also mentioned a couple of other things in his message. For example, that my wife had apparently started falling in love with me again during her pregnancy, which apparently shocked both of them, and that I should therefore at least consider giving our marriage a second chance. Of course, that's complete nonsense. If she truly started falling for me again, why was the neighbor still in her life? I don't understand why they think I'm so gullible. My wife is upset, but there's nothing I can do about it. What angers her most is that I knew everything from the very beginning, yet still stayed with her and endured the whole charade. She accuses me of lying to her, of being wrong for staying by her side throughout her pregnancy and misleading her even though I knew the child wasn't mine and that she had cheated on me with our neighbor. Update 1. It's been about a week since the baby was born, and I'm still staying in a hotel room. I haven't visited my wife once and have no plans to do so. She keeps sending messages and calling, but I don't understand why, since I've made it perfectly clear that I don't want to talk to her or listen to anything she has to say. I haven't blocked her yet, but I've already blocked the neighbor after he had the nerve to message me and remind me that my wife is still hoping I'll come back to her. I'm 100% certain the only reason he's still with her and trying to convince me to forgive her is because he's counting on her getting at least some alimony from the divorce. After all, they're both essentially unemployed. My wife was a homemaker, which I respected and appreciated, but she wasn't just managing the household, she was also cheating on me behind my back, and that's unforgivable. And before anyone starts attacking me, let me clarify. It wasn't me who asked her to quit her job after we got married. While we were still dating, I supported her career ambitions, and she had a job. But later, she herself said she wanted to leave her job and focus on our home. I didn't object. It was her choice, and I earn enough to support us. I'm fairly confident my lawyer will be able to get me out of paying alimony once we prove she committed adultery, and I hope that won't be difficult to demonstrate. As for the neighbor, he's still struggling to find well-paid work in the modeling industry, so he's in no position to support her. The photos of the emails sent from her secret account are still safely stored on my phone and backed up on my laptop, so I'm not overly worried. Even if she deletes the account, she can't erase those images in my possession, and I know I'll be protected either way. At worst, I'm even prepared to pay some alimony just to be done with her. She should consider herself lucky that I'm giving her time to vacate our house on her own instead of evicting her immediately. After all, the house is legally in my name. Right now, I'm hoping for the best, and that this whole mess will settle down soon.
Update 2. I was right. My wife is an idiot and decided to negotiate because she wasn't satisfied with the settlement I offered, which basically only covered the amount she'd spent during our marriage. And honestly, even that seemed generous to me. I have no idea what miracle she's expecting. Well, good luck to her. Yesterday, she messaged me saying she'd vacated the house. I happily returned home, assuming she'd probably moved in with her parents or something similar. But I was disappointed to learn she'd moved into our neighbor's house across the street. Now I have to see her and her boyfriend every single day. I briefly considered moving back to the hotel, but I decided against it. This is my home, and I have every right to live wherever I choose. I wasn't about to pack up and leave just because they wanted to make my life miserable. I wondered why my wife didn't go live with her parents. After all, cohabiting with the man I accused her of cheating with would only hurt her case in the divorce proceedings and complicate things further. But I didn't have to wonder for long. While scrolling through all the unread messages I'd received over the past few days from various people, I noticed one from her father. I hadn't replied to many of the people who'd messaged me recently, and her father's note had gotten lost among the rest. It was a long message in which he expressed regret over what his daughter had done and stated clearly that their family strongly condemns her actions. His words meant a lot to me and confirmed that my feelings were entirely justified. I even felt tears welling up, but I held them back. He apologized for my wife's behavior and said he would no longer support her in any way, especially now that she'd announced her intention to contest the divorce. Until that point, nothing my wife had done made any sense. Everything she attempted only backfired on her. Surely even someone like her should realize that by now. Either she's incredibly foolish, or she still has some twisted, underhanded schemes in mind. I hope not.
Update 3. A month has passed since divorce negotiations began, and so far, things have gone very poorly for my wife. I managed to prove she'd committed adultery. She even made it easier for me by moving in with the very man I'd accused her of cheating with. There was no doubt left about the truth of my claims. She tried to fabricate a counter-accusation, claiming I was an alcoholic, which she alleged caused my infertility, and that this was why she cheated. She claimed that while we were trying to conceive, I became extremely cruel and bitter toward her. But this was easily disproven. Everyone knew I'd quit drinking last year when we decided to try for a baby, and I haven't touched alcohol since. Again, I wonder why she thought that lie would work. It was incredibly foolish. I think she was just grasping at straws after her original plan collapsed spectacularly. Now she's too busy with motherhood to cook up any grand, elaborate schemes. She's overwhelmed, and the baby's father is too clueless, so there they are, stuck in their mess. By now it's clear to both of us that her chances of receiving any alimony are extremely slim. I suspect she told her boyfriend as much because a few days ago she and the baby were callously thrown out of his house. Yes, it's true. I heard shouting and cursing coming from their place, and within minutes I saw them literally push my wife with the baby in her arms out onto the street while hurling vile insults and curses at her. I watched the whole scene from my living room. The moment I saw him shove her while she was holding the child, I ran outside to help. Personal animosity didn't matter. I couldn't let an innocent baby suffer for something that wasn't his fault. By the time I reached their doorstep, the door had already slammed shut. My wife and her son were standing there, sobbing. I picked up the baby, grabbed my wife by the hand, and took them back across the street to my house. Then I called her father to come pick her up. He arrived an hour later and took them home, thanking me again for everything I'd done. During that hour, my wife cried like a child, so I had to comfort both mother and baby. I wanted to call the police, but she managed to talk me out of it. She didn't want even more trouble. She apologized over and over for everything that happened and said she'd been so desperately in love that she'd lost all sense of dignity and moral compass. She genuinely regretted everything. She said she'd accept whatever outcome came and wouldn't argue anymore. She just wanted the divorce finalized as quickly as possible. I suppose there's a silver lining in all this. I hope she finds the strength to file a report against that bastard and finally gets the psychological help she clearly needs. At the very least, I did everything I could and acted with integrity. And I don't regret a single thing.
Well, let me know in the comments what you think of this whole story. Thanks for watching this video to the end. Check out our previous video right here. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and good luck.